Okay, welcome to my next tutorial on CloudBees Jenkins X distribution. I'm going to show you how to enable TLS and custom domain. First of all, make sure you have the kubectl version that I'm showing here. The latest 1.17 does not work. What I'm showing here is a successful install of CJXD version 5. Okay, and you get a nice overview. You get the cluster status with all of the objects that are created in Kubernetes after the install, right? So you get pods, volumes, their statuses, IDs, all of that good stuff. This is what you should see whenever you have a successful install. So there are our ingress endpoints, right? Currently not secure, and I'm currently not using custom domain, so you see the IP address. So let's get started. So we're going to configure on our requirements YAML file. We have different entries for different environments. There's for our dev environment. There's our staging, as you can see here on line 36. The thing that I did before this for custom domain is that I created a custom zone in Cloud DNS and Google Cloud. Because if I tear down this cluster and use the same subdomain or domain, then everything just works for me, right? All the records get updated. So mine is CJXD.SharePointOscar.com, my domain, and of course that's the zone name. And so I purchased a domain that I've been using for years, but in that domain, I had to create some name server entries to point to these name servers. And you can see my subdomain there, CJXD, with all the name server entries. So that's in place. That's what needs to be in place for this to be successful when using a custom domain. And you're just playing around with it or want to tear down the cluster and rebuild it, ensure that you can reuse this domain, right? So with that in place, we'll go back to our requirements file, but also I'll show you that the endpoints are not secure and they're not using a custom domain at the moment, right? Our goal is to have that use custom domain as well as HTTPS. So as I said, there's different ingress endpoints, production, dev, staging. The one we want to modify today is this one, starting at line 47. And I'm going to change that to CJXD.SharePointOscar.com. I'm going to say true to enable external DNS, and I'm going to add a dot there. That's just going to give me a cleaner URL. You'll see in the end what I mean. And let me go ahead and type in for TLS an email address, enable it, and say production true. So now we want to execute JX boot. And this is going to trigger the pipeline to make any changes that it's going to detect on my requirements YAML file. So we'll let that run. You'll see that I have not enabled backup. That would be for another tutorial where I show you how to configure backup of your instance using Valero, which we have built in. So you can see all the steps that it's going to run through here. Install JXCRDs. It's just going through the defined pipeline. You know, every time you execute JXBoot, it will go through every step. There is a flag where you can say JXBoot and then begin or start -step, and you tell it which step you want it to start. Right? I didn't do that in this case, just so you can see everything that goes on in the background. You know, just showing you how the first endpoint that will be affected by this change will be the Vault, the HashiCorp Vault endpoint. That is installed by default with CJXD, and that will be the first change we see. So I think we're, as you can see in the install Nginx controller, that affects a lot of things, and the first endpoint, like I said, affected is the Vault one. So let's take a look as it progresses. So that's the step it's in now. And you can see we are enabling a custom domain. It's telling us we can enable TLS, which we have. It's going to create a new secret, as you can see, CJXD 5-DN. And now it's going to install external DNS because we specified that in our requirements YAML. So we'll let it finish this step. I did not want to pause the recording. I wanted you to see things as they happened. Some of these things take a little while. Feel free to fast forward in case you're looking for something in particular. What I'm showing you here on line 75 is that equates to the CJXD release 5. Right, so that's the version you want to have there. Also, in a future tutorial, I'll show you how to enable Lighthouse, and there are reasons to use Lighthouse. We grabbed a portion of the code from Prow to be able to show you how you can use other Git providers, and that's the reason why you might want to use it. Right, you might have GitLab or Bitbucket or something else. Prow was and is really good and only does GitHub. So we'll deal with that in the future tutorial. What you're seeing here is some CRDs that were installed for Cert Manager as we progress in the changes to our cluster. So some new CRDs have been installed on our Kubernetes cluster. And we'll let that proceed. Now it's installing Cert Manager, as you can see, and no changes to our endpoints yet, but I think pretty soon you'll see, because Cert Manager needs to finish installing. All right, so it's finished that, and now it's going to get those certificates in place and issue those. And there it is. So the install vault step is the one that will technically modify our vault instance and add TLS to the endpoint. So let's wait for that to finish. As I said, didn't want to pause this video because I want you to see the log in real time. So feel free to fast forward to the point that you need to. It should be done shortly. So pretty soon our vault endpoint, there it is. Now it's using TLS and our URL looks much cleaner. So there it is. The next endpoints should be modified. It will take a little while to do that, but you can see that the cjxd.sharepointoscar.com domain was applied, so it's much cleaner and secure. So we can expect the same thing with the rest of the endpoints if all goes well. You never know. Bad things can happen. Mostly good things, I think. So let's see, where are we here? Yep, it finished configuring the vault operator, so it's done with that. It's going to move on to the other endpoints and updating webhooks for the environment repositories, the dev, the staging, and the production, as well as all those endpoints that I showed you. And it's just going through things and reusing configuration I already had from the initial install, right? My bot account, which is the pipeline, GitHub username, all that stuff. Nothing new there. So let's let it run through that. So there, it's going to go through install Jenkins X, which really just means modifying any other configuration items. Now, one thing to note is that all of these steps are predefined steps in the Jenkins-X.yaml file, also on this boot repository. So you can see it right above, on the left side, right above my requirements YAML file, right? Those are the steps that are being executed right now and are executed every time. Like I said, you can skip, if you know what you're doing, you can skip a whole bunch of steps and specify the boot command what step to start in by passing that flag that I mentioned. So just to recap of the configuration, you can see namespace subdomain has a dot, right? Before it has like -jx, which I hate personally. I wanted my URLs to be cleaner, so I just put a dot in there so that it can break that nicely. And you saw that in the vault configuration endpoint, so it's a cleaner URL. Now you can see that as things progress, we enabled external DNS, and this file, the requirements file, it's also getting modified along the way. So it added on line 48 that entry, right? The secret, a new secret was created. And here's the definition of all these steps I mentioned of the pipeline that is currently running, right? You can see verify installation is the last step, and then install pipelines, install repositories. There's the current step being executed, so we've got a few steps to go. So there it is. It's in the verified Jenkins X environment. It's validating the repository now, starting dev, the production. And it, of course, is using my fictitious GitHub organization and GitHub bot account, which I've previously set up. All right, now it's going to execute install repository step as we saw in the pipeline. Install pipelines just started. And there's the update webhooks. So pretty soon we'll have the last step. The update webhooks is important, right? It goes to every environment repo and updates the webhook to reflect the new domain and the new endpoint, basically. So that's important to happen within the pipeline. So there it is, it's done. We can see that everything was updated successfully. There were no errors, and you can see in all of these webhooks, it now has the correct HTTPS with the domain. So if we execute our get URLs command one last time, we should see all of these updated. And that concludes our tutorial. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and look out for future tutorials on CJXD and Jenkins X in general.